Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Horn, and I'm the Regional Director for ADL Texoma, serving North Texas and Oklahoma. For those less familiar with ADL, we are the leading anti-hate organization in the world. Founded in 1913, our timeless mission is to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all. For more than 110 years, ADL has fought all forms of anti-Semitism and bias, and today we continue that work with renewed urgency. In the face of rising anti-Semitism and hate, ADL's work centers on three core priorities. We protect, we advocate, and we educate. We protect Jewish communities and all vulnerable populations by tracking and exposing extremism, providing security resources, and responding rapidly to incidents of hate. We advocate for just policies at the local, state, and federal levels, working with elected officials and community leaders to advance legislation that safeguards civil rights and combats discrimination. And we educate through comprehensive programs in schools, workplaces, and communities, equipping people with the knowledge and tools to recognize and challenge anti-Semitism and all forms of bigotry. Here in the Texoma region, we've seen firsthand the urgent need for this work. Our region has experienced concerning increases in anti-Semitic incidents, from swastikas on public property to extremist propaganda and threatening communications. Texas, as a whole, has experienced alarming levels of extremist activity, including white supremacist propaganda distributions and acts of violence targeting the Jewish community. I'm very grateful you're all here today. I look forward to our discussion, and now I will pass it off to my friend Joel Schweitzer.
Thank you, Alex. And I also want to take a moment to thank Frank for bringing us together and Rob for sharing your experiences and expertise. As I told Frank when we were first discussing doing this, it's so nice to have an opportunity to work with ADL on something that isn't directly combating an issue with anti-Semitism in our community, which we do quite a bit together. For those who may not know AJC, we are the global advocacy organization for the Jewish people. AJC creates trusted partnerships with leaders around the world to ensure that Jews and Israel are safe and thriving. With an unparalleled reach spanning 6 continents, AJC engages leaders in more than 110 countries through our 40 offices and dozens of partnerships with Jewish communities worldwide. Wherever the Jewish people in Israel need us, AJC is there. AJC empowers leaders in government, education, partner communities, and the private sector to take action that counters anti-Semitism and allows them to be allies to the Jewish people in Israel. And those leaders we engage include presidents, prime ministers, diplomats, national, state, and local government elected officials, university, college, and K through 12 administrators, social media and tech executives, as well as interfaith and intergroup allies. We do this advocacy by building enduring relationships with those leaders, educating those leaders to inspire their action, driving impact by advancing actionable strategies, policies, and solutions, and strengthening the Jewish future, shaping a world where Jews and Israel can thrive. And that work, of course, brings us into frequent partnership with our friends and partners at ADL. And it's my pleasure to turn it back over to Alex to introduce Frank.
Thank you. And Frank, Rob, thank you both for this invitation today. It's very exciting to come together, and we appreciate it. So Frank is a longtime and close friend of Rob Ganji. Their friendship began many years ago over lunch with Rob's father, who is an internationally renowned human rights champion who served as Minister of Education. Frank retired as the vice president and treasurer of ExxonMobil, after which he joined the board of directors of Pioneer Natural Resources, serving for 18 years. Frank has dedicated himself to civic and communal life, both within the Jewish community and across Dallas. He served as president of Temple Emmanuel and as board chair of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. He's also served on the board and executive committee of ADL Texoma and Hayas International. In the broader community, Frank has held a number of important leadership roles. He served as board chair of the Communities Foundation of Texas and also as the board chair and now life trustee of the Dallas Theater Center. In addition, he has served on the board and executive committee of the AT&T Performing Arts Center and on the board of Dallas CASA, where he now serves as a lifetime director. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Frank. Thank you again for being here today. We look forward to the discussion.
Alex, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And Alex and Joel both, thank you very much for bringing these two organizations, your two organizations together to make it possible for Rob to speak to the groups. You'll see he has a very important and unique perspective on what's going on, and this will be a great opportunity for all of us, I think. So thank you very, very, very much. Um, Rob, let's just start on a personal note, a personal question. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts about how the war is going, and while you're at it, with your very long personal involvement and advocacy for freedom and democracy. Um, but before we do that, let me just say that, as Alex indicated, I met Rob over 20 years ago in Dallas. We had lunch, as she told you, with his father, Manouchehr Ganji, former Iranian Minister of Education under the Shah and prominent human rights luminary. 7 months after the '79 Iranian Revolution, Rob's father made a daring escape from Iran with the help of friends and devoted his life in exile to championing freedom and human rights and secular democracy for Iran. And now Rob has carried his family's legacy forward as really a steadfast advocate for the freedom of Iran. He's a successful business executive in Dallas. He's focused on high impact ventures, education, healthcare, and energy sectors. He's also served with me on the board of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, and executive committee, and partnered with the museum to develop and implement the now extremely successful Upstander initiative at the educational technology company that he formerly led as CEO. So we're really pleased that you're joining us today and sharing your perspective on the situation in Iran, Rob. But as I said, why don't we just open up with some of your own personal reflections on the war and how you think this is going.
Thank you. Thank you, first of all, Frank, for that very kind introduction and for your friendship throughout these years. Um, I also obviously want to thank Alex and Joe for their excellent work in organizing this event. It's a pleasure to once again address the distinguished board members of both ADL and AJC, as well as the many esteemed community leaders who are joining us today. Frank, I also want to thank you for mentioning my father. Obviously, he is my hero and a true trailblazer for freedom and human rights in Iran. Now 95, he devoted his life, as Frank said, um, after the revolution of 1979 to Iran's freedom, primarily through civil disobedience and political defiance through the two organizations he founded and led, the Organization for Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms for Iran and Sazman Darafsh Kaviani, or the Flag of Freedom Organization of Iran. As in regards to your question about my feelings on the war, um, obviously, my emotions are like a roller coaster each day. I go through anxiety, fear, worry, concern, and hope, all depending on the developments of that day. Um, I was very hopeful to hear President Trump's support for the Iranian people. On Saturday night, my wife and I were also filled with joy and happiness when we heard that the second American airman was heroically rescued by the US military. We had also hoped that the Iranian people would have assisted him to make sure he would be safe from the terrorist Mullah regime. So his rescue truly brought us great joy and renewed hope on Easter Day. And then there are statements like striking Iran extremely hard and bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong, or claiming that we have had regime change, which is not accurate. We haven't had regime change. Those are disappointing and cause concern. These inconsistencies and mixed messaging dishearten the Iranian people. They're the ones who pose the greatest existential threat to the Mullah regime and who stand as the strongest assets of freedom and allies of the United States. And it's very important that they don't feel disheartened and they continue with the struggle that they've been leading, the homegrown struggle, knowing that the United States is fully supportive of what they're trying to accomplish. So, with that, Frank, I believe I'll be able to address this question about how the war is going, especially my reflections on it, more thoroughly in my prepared remarks. And with that, I'll begin that and then address the questions and any other comments that you have. But as we gather via Zoom in the midst of Passover, celebrating the timeless story of the Jewish people's journey from slavery and tyranny to freedom, we're reminded that the yearning for liberty is both universal and eternal. Just as the Israelites broke free from oppression thousands of years ago, today the courageous people of Iran have risen against a brutal theocratic dictatorship, seeking freedom from the grip of a terrorist mullah regime and its militant Islamist ideology. Their struggle embodies the very spirit of Passover, the triumph of hope and courage over fear and injustice. This murderous regime has taken the lives of hundreds of thousands of Iranians and non-Iranians since seizing power in 1979. Earlier this year, on January 8th and 9th alone, more than 35,000 innocent protesters were killed nationwide for demanding basic rights and regime change. Today, the Iranian people remain anxious spectators, waiting for the bombings to cease so that they can rise again to end the tyranny of the mullah establishment. Yet, even as they wait, they live under constant threats from regime-backed and foreign proxy thugs who roam the streets to enforce silence. The regime openly warns that those who come out to demonstrate will be killed. Meanwhile, they've endured nearly 40 days of digital darkness, cut off from the world to silence their voices and suppress their revolution for freedom. And in this age of unprecedented connectivity, no nation should be left in isolation, especially in such critical times. It's our moral duty as upstanders and free people to help ensure their voices are heard so that when protests reignite, their struggle for freedom prevails. With that spirit in mind, let me turn to the current situation. Obviously, I don't have a crystal ball, but as Frank said, I'll try to share some insights and then address your questions, even though events are changing by the hour. To understand what is at stake, let me first set the stage with some key indicators. Prior to the 1979 revolution, Iran's population was 36 million. Today, it exceeds 93 million. Daily oil production was 6 million barrels, with 5 million exported. Today, daily production stands at 4.1 million and exports at 1.6 million. The currency fell from 70 rials to $1 to about 1.7 million rials to $1 today. And inflation, once in the single digits, now exceeds 60%. To appreciate the depth of Iran's regression, in 1979, Iran was on par with South Korea, and today it is closer to North Korea. Iranians have endured decades of deceit, repression, destruction, and stolen opportunity at the hands of the mullah establishment. If you recall, the mullah regime came to power in 1979, claiming to champion freedom, independence, and self-sufficiency, promising paradise on earth. The U.S. ambassador to Iran at the time described Khomeini as the Gandhi-like figure of Iran. Today, its main slogan is death to America and death to Israel. It's one of the most repressive, corrupt, and incompetent regimes in the world, and the leading state sponsor of terrorism with an economy in shambles. Keep in mind that Iran has one of the youngest educated and entrepreneurial populations in the region and holds the world's second largest natural gas reserves and third largest crude oil reserves. The mullah regime supports international terrorism in numerous ways. What's allowed them to be able to effectively support this is the dollars that they get from their oil. They've spread radical Islamic militant ideology. They've incited martyrdom and violence and have mastered the creation and support of proxy terrorist groups such as the Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and Shiite militias in Iraq, among others. And since their inception, they've violated virtually every rule of civilized international conduct by actively sponsoring global terrorism, pursuing nuclear weapons, undermining regional peace and stability, abusing human rights at home, and carrying out assassinations abroad, while fostering militant Islamic fundamentalism and spreading anti-American and anti-Israeli hatred throughout the world. By the way, they are the primary instigators of anti-American and anti-Israeli hatred. The regime's power structure rests on two primary pillars: militant Islamic ideology and brute force. As supreme leaders, both the founder, Khomeini, and his successor, Khamenei, have had the blood of thousands of Americans, Israelis, and other nationals on their hands, with the record of terrorist acts beginning with the 1979 U.S. hostage crisis in Tehran and continuing through the Marine barracks bombing in Lebanon in 1983, to the Jewish Community Center bombing in Argentina in 1994, to the Khobar Tower bombings in Saudi Arabia in 1996, to the USS Cole bombing in Yemen in 2000, to the attacks on many American and coalition soldiers in Iraq with their IEDs from 2003 until 2011, to the 2023 terrorist attack on Israel by Hamas, resulting in over 1,200 deaths and the abduction of 250 hostages, to their brutal tactics unleashed by the Islamic Revolutionary Guards and their proxies to sustain Bashar Assad repressive dictatorship in Syria and contributing to the death of over 500,000 innocent people, and to their ongoing support for Putin's war in Ukraine by supplying Russia with these Shahid drones, killing thousands of innocent Ukrainians. And these are just a few examples. The list is very long. It's been documented. Ironically, Khamenei's death to America and death to Israel slogans ultimately led to his death by US and Israeli action, along with over 80 other senior Islamic Revolutionary Guard and political leaders, and that number is still rising. Khamenei was more willing to die than to compromise, and no figure within the mullah regime establishment, which is now dominated by the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, has the legitimacy or the authority to reverse nearly 5 decades of anti-American and anti-Israeli policy, and this is evident today. The Mullah regime has long been a threat to the United States, to Europe, to Israel, to the Persian Gulf states, and the broader civilized world. Sadly, Western democracies underestimated this danger and refused to come to terms with its true nature, favoring appeasement and engagement for nearly 5 decades in search of moderates and reformists, ultimately bringing us to the current crisis. And as Donald Rumsfeld observed, there are known unknowns and unknown unknowns, and the Iran war is proving this point daily. 5 weeks into the conflict, it's evident that the United States and Israel must maintain strategic focus, show resolve, and stay the course to see the mission through victory. The fractured regime is playing the long game, but America must sustain the endurance and clarity of purpose required to prevail. The Mullah regime is desperate. Iran's economy is collapsing. The most powerful force against it, the Iranian people, remain passive as anxious observers for now, as bombings continue, but their anti-regime freedom protests will inevitably reignite, and they will become active participants once again at the opportune time. The regime's recent actions, closing of the Strait of Hormuz, strikes against Israel and Persian Gulf Arab allies, and attempting to destabilize the region through their weakened terror proxies, reflect both desperation and calculation. To survive, the Mullah establishment seeks to strike at the global economy where it hurts most, disrupting energy supplies, trade flows, and market stability, to provoke regional panic and fuel both U.S. anxiety and partisan divide. These are the moves of a weakened and wounded adversary, still capable of inflicting considerable damage. Despite its fragility, the Mullah regime's capacity for harm remains dangerously real, particularly with their remaining missiles, launchers, and their Shahed drones. For the Mullah regime establishment, this war is existential, and they're committed to slaughtering their own people en masse to stay in power. For the United States and Israel, victory requires not only military success, but foresight about what follows. The day after will prove even more consequential than the war itself. The emergence of a failed state and the potential outbreak of civil war would have devastating consequences for Iran and well beyond its borders, dwarfing the past turmoil experienced in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. And any hope of negotiating with remnants of the Mullah regime, whose ideology glorifies martyrdom, death to America, death to Israel, and rules by sheer force, is futile and destined to fail. In fact, if elements of the Mullah regime stay in power, a more radicalized and repressive IRGC will continue to hold Iran hostage and inflict even greater harm on the Iranian people, the region, and the wider world. These would be the worst possible outcomes for Iranians, for regional stability, and for global security. History clearly shows that appeasement and engagement with the Mullah regime has repeatedly been met with deception and broken promises, and that their words do not match their actions. Today's Iran's Arab neighbors, including those who for decades accommodated or did the bidding for the Mullah regime, also increasingly recognize that lasting regional stability cannot coexist with remnants of the terrorist Mullah regime. And most importantly, The overwhelming majority of the Iranian people want complete regime change and will not settle for anything less. Therefore, a coherent US and Israeli strategy toward Iran should continue with rapid, targeted military operations to further degrade the regime's nuclear, missile, drone, and repression infrastructure, as well as its ability to threaten the Strait of Hormuz. There should be a clear distinction between military and civilian targets. Once core military objectives are consolidated, the continued focus should be in securing long-term maritime transit through the Persian Gulf. And at the same time, the United States and Israel should intensify efforts to further weaken the regime's repressive infrastructure, encourage defections from the conventional military and security forces to the people's side, and support Iran's homegrown freedom movement when uprisings resume. They must demonstrate unwavering resolve and finish the job through decisive, coordinated action, further degrading the regime's security and political command structures and targeting its instruments of repression, including foreign proxies recently deployed from Iraq and Afghanistan. These measures will weaken internal control and accelerate the regime's collapse. Washington should also help foster a united secular and democratic opposition, creating the conditions for Iranians to collapse the regime themselves. And in this process, no credibility or legitimacy should be extended to remnants of the ruling mullah establishment. This message should not be mistaken for US engineered regime change. The Iranian people themselves, through their own homegrown struggle for freedom, have already made clear their demand for an end to clerical rule. For over 3 decades, they have courageously fought for human rights, secular democracy, and a better life, a struggle recently exemplified by their nationwide uprisings in January, which extended across all 31 provinces and more than 150 cities. Their chants of freedom and death to the dictator resonate with one clear message: Iranians do not seek reform, they seek freedom and regime change. Khamenei and the entire mullah establishment long understood that the greatest threat to their survival was domestic discontent caused by horrific economic, social, and political conditions. In fact, their ruthless nature, combined with their deceptive nuclear weapons strategy, was also designed to guarantee regime survivability and prevent precisely the situation now unfolding. Many Iranians recognize that the ruling mullahs have imposed this war and dragged the country into it, and they welcome America's intervention to help achieve their liberty. Therefore, today it's essential for the United States and Israel to stay the course while preserving the sanctity of the Iranian people's homegrown freedom movement and ensuring that no pretext undermines this foundational principle and that no action is taken which might dishearten the people. Civilian protection must remain a top priority, along with preserving Iran's territorial integrity and avoiding harm to its national infrastructure, including its energy and water infrastructure, premises that, if neglected, will definitely sow divisions and significant instability. Preventing the mullah regime from monopolizing information and spreading falsehoods is also critical. Providing Starlink satellite internet, short and medium wave radio, and satellite TV to enable the free flow of outside news will inform and empower the Iranian people. Ensuring consistent communication with Iranians and differentiating between them and the regime, while reaffirming that their will alone will determine Iran's future government, is also vital. Just last month, President Trump issued a bold call for freedom, urging the great proud people of Iran to take over your government once U.S. military operations conclude, and pledging America's overwhelming support. However, his remarks last week about bombing Iran very hard for 2 to 3 weeks and bringing the country back to the Stone Age, where they belong if negotiations are not successful, are inconsistent and send a mixed message, which is unsettling for the Iranian people. Today, the greatest known unknown lies not in the mullah's next move, but in the consistency and resolve of the United States and how committed the free world stands with the Iranian people when they return to the streets ready to secure their freedom. With the regime's security apparatus weakening, hope remains that Iran's conventional military, the Artesh, will side with the people when that moment comes. Unlike the IRGC or the Revolutionary Guards, which was created to guard the Islamic Revolution and has become the regime's primary instrument of repression and corruption, with loyalty only to the establishment, the Artesh is composed of career officers less shaped by militant Islamic indoctrination and corruption, and has historically been more reluctant to turn their weapons on civilians. Ideally, the success of this freedom revolution will yield a secular democratic Iran grounded in freedom, equality, the rule of law, and territorial integrity, a vision long pursued by generations of patriotic Iranians inside and outside of the country. Such a transformation would not only fulfill the universal promise of Passover, the triumph of hope and courage over oppression, but also enhance global security and reshape the Middle East for generations to come. With freedom and economic opportunity restored, Iran could once again unlock its immense potential, empowering its people to thrive and forging it as one of the strongest regional allies for the United States and Israel. Only an Iran liberated from the terrorist Mullah regime and its militant Islamist ideology can deliver lasting peace and security to its people, the Middle East, and the wider world. That historic opportunity now stands on the brink of reality, and the coming weeks, if not months, will be decisive. Regardless of where one stands on being for or against the Iran war, the ultimate goal we must all aspire to is a full and lasting victory, one that ensures freedom, security, and peace for all. So let us stand together today in this shared commitment for the people of Iran, for the United States, for Israel, and for a more peaceful and hopeful world. So with that, Frank, I think I've set the stage for your questions and for the audience questions going forward.
Well, thank you, Rob. Terrific. Great way to get us started here. And we got some great questions from the from the audience to field, and let's get right on with it. You know, the hatred of the regime for Israel is very well known, and you've spoken about it. Alongside the U.S. as the big Satan, there's Israel as the little Satan, and really a target for extinction, by the regime. And through its proxies and directly and indirectly, Iran has waged war with Israel now for a very long time, but let's imagine that somehow there is regime change, and the eventual outcome of a freely elected democratic government replaces the current regime. Say a little bit more about how you see Iran's relationship with Israel changing, broaden it then to Iran's position in that geography with the Arab states as well, if you like. Um, and you know very well, and you've alluded to it at a time of growing anti-Semitism around the world. Maybe you can speak a little bit about the attitudes of and the feelings of the Iranian people to Jews around the world, and the current scourge of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I'll definitely want to start with that because that's very important under the current environment. As I said, look, this regime for 47 years has used Iran's full resources. Instead of building schools and streets and clinics for its own people, they have donated this money to various militant terrorist groups all across. They have promoted this ideology purely based on promoting hatred towards Israel. So I blame this regime significantly. But the fact of the matter here is the overwhelming majority of the Iranian people reject anti Semitism and they honor their ancient friendship with the Jewish people. I want to remind everyone that Iran enjoyed very strong ties with Israel in 1979 before the revolution. And this strong bond isn't just about prior to the revolution, it dates back 2,500 years to the time of Cyrus the Great, the king of Persia who freed the Jews and allowed them to rebuild their temple in Jerusalem and practice their faith. So I recall that in 79, we had probably the largest Iranian Jewish community, between 80 to 100,000. It was the second largest after Israel in the Middle East region. And Iran has been able to live side by side with all different religions and ethnicities in harmony, including our Jewish citizens. And I'm 100% confident that when Iranians realize their freedom and are able to rid themselves of this terrorist regime, barbaric regime, Iran's relationship with Israel will be stronger than ever, and our deep ties rooted to 2,500 years ago will continue to cherish.
Thank you, Rob. Terrific question. The question that we have asks, how can we in the diaspora help the Iranian people achieve regime change once the military strikes come to an end? How is that going to happen? And I would add, what do you see? Where do you see a role for the United States and all that? And I'm remembering back vividly to the conversation with your father 20 years ago about what would it take to bring about regime change and what could be what America's position could be in helping that happen. And here we are 20 years later talking about the same subject. Say a little bit about what it would take to make that happen and what role this country could play in helping.
Yeah, so this is a failure, obviously, where we are today of both Republican and Democratic administrations, as well as the Europeans, which, as I said, for 47 years were willing to fool themselves and pay more respect to the regime's words rather than their actions and not make the difficult decisions. Obviously, where we are now, with the war going on, this regime is relying on two significant pillars to keep it in power. One is the Revolutionary Guards and the security forces. By that I mean the Revolutionary Guards and their armed security forces who are fighting the war. And then they're also relying on their repressive forces, including foreign proxies that they brought from Afghanistan and Iraq, to crush the Iranian people because they know that the biggest existential threat to them are the Iranian people. So what can people outside do to make sure once the Iranian people rise inside, they're successful. Number one, for 40 days, there hasn't been any connectivity. I mean, how can you not be able to communicate with the most important assets in the country, the Iranian people, to let them know what needs to take place, what they should do, when they should come out, when they should not come out? That's number one. So connectivity, if you can influence whoever you can, internet connectivity, Starlink, satellite TV, radio, go back to shortwave radio. Everyone in Iran has shortwave and medium wave radios. There needs to be communication inside with the people of Iran and inform them what needs to happen. Number two, convince your leadership not to send mixed messages. Mixed messages are the worst thing. I mean, this war started really well with both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump constantly communicating with the Iranian people and differentiating between the Iranian people and the terrorist mullah regime. Now, all of a sudden, we're putting everyone back into the same box and we're saying we're going to destroy all of you. That's not the way to move forward. I mean, you want to keep the biggest assets who are on our side, the Iranian people, to be able to take advantage of the appropriate time to come into the streets and not be disheartened and say, well, here we go again. They've cut a deal with the hardline remnants of the regime, and we're going to be slaughtered again. That's not the right messaging. So whatever needs to happen to send that messaging is critical. The third is, I totally disagree with hitting any type of civilian targets or any infrastructure that will immediately impact the Iranian people, whether it's the water desalination plants, whether it's power plants, whether it's trains and others. Strategically, you have to be able to differentiate between military targets and civilian targets. Now, if there are certain trains that are carrying weapons, fine. Make sure that you can communicate with the Iranian people. Make sure that you can justify the reasoning for hitting those trains that are taking military equipment or other things, and hit those just like you have before. Targeted strikes, but make sure you educate the Iranian people to ensure we don't lose the support that is required, because ultimately the Iranian people are the ones who are going to bring this regime down. And it would be the biggest mistake for us to lose the trust that has been built with the Iranian people and the support that is required for them to be successful.
Thank you, Rob. The question is raised, back to your comments about the anti-Semitism of the regime and the strong anti-Israel move that they've made over all these years. Meanwhile, it's a new generation of Iranians, lots of young people. To what extent do you think there's a risk that they've been indoctrinated somehow? Are you convinced? You make a strong case for the affection that the Iranian people have had historically for the Jewish people. You expect that to continue after 47 years of this indoctrination?
Absolutely. First of all, keep in mind that of the 93 million population that Iran has, this regime maximum has the support of 10 to 15 million people. Let's put those aside. I don't think it's possible to change how they think. But the overwhelming majority, the 80 million Iranians, and this is who I'm looking at, I think needs to be addressed to. These are the people who were chanting during their protests. One of their chants was, neither Gaza or Lebanon, I will give my life for Iran. And in Farsi that was, Na Gaza nan janam fadai Iran. What did that mean? That meant we're not going to support Hamas. We're not going to support Hezbollah. Our priority is Iran. And that was a message to the regime that we have no issues with Israel. Our issue is with you. The 80 million population of Iran, after 47 years, have been able to see exactly what this regime has brought them. And they have seen that in order for them to be able to fool everyone, they wanted to create enemies, the small Satan and the big Satan, the United States and Israel. And that has failed. As a matter of fact, you have probably the most pro-American, pro-Israeli populace in Iran today than any other country in that region. The United States might have allies in that region whose rulers are pro-American and for convenience today are doing accords with Israel. But the populace in those countries are not pro-American or pro-Israeli. And you can ask this from Jewish Iranians. There's plenty of Jewish Iranians who live in the United States today. One of the largest, most successful is in California. You can ask them how they feel, how the Iranian Jewish community feels about the Iranians inside who are non-Jewish and the support they have. So I seriously think that this is a very deeply rooted relationship between Iranians and the Jewish people. And you're only going to see this strengthening when this regime is gone.
Rob, we've talked about regime change, and let's just sort of pitch ourselves forward and say that, that looks like it's closer on the horizon. What can you tell us about Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah? He's very well. He's put himself forward as someone that can be instrumental in aiding a smooth transition to a democratic Iran. Is there a role for him? Is there that role to be played, and is he the right one to play it? Or and while you're at it, are there others in Iran or outside of Iran today who are widely supported and might be in contention with Reza, for such a role? But to say a little bit about how that new regime would be led.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So first of all, I've known Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi for over 4 decades. And as full disclosure, not only have I been close friends with him, I'm married to his cousin. During all the years that I've known him, I have witnessed his unwavering determination to Iran's freedom, to Iran's territorial integrity, his commitment to secular democracy and human rights, and most importantly, to the Iranian people's right to be able to choose their own form of government. And today, as you rightly say, his name is being invoked in Iran. Obviously, there's no independent polling, but some polls show that he has at least 33% approval popularity inside Iran. I have no idea what the right number is, but one thing I do know is he is the only opposition leader whose name is invoked, primarily because of the service his grandfather and father did to the modernity of Iran, to the progress of Iran, to their commitment to the territorial integrity of Iran, and also because of his background in being a voice for the Iranian people. Now, is he the only person? Absolutely not. And he'll be the first to tell you that many of the leaders of Iran today are in the prisons in Iran because under this regime, obviously you can't organize yourself and you'll be killed. And there have been many secular democratic opposition leaders and organizations that have been committed to civil disobedience who have worked very hard to get us to where we are today. Now, can Reza Pahlavi play a pivotal role to unify the Iranian people as a trusted person who has the domestic legitimacy, international credibility, commitment to Iran's territorial integrity, to be able to be a transitional leader and move the country towards that free and fair elections based on the 4 core principles that all the leaders, whether they're inside Iran or outside, Republicans or monarchists, will agree to. One is the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the Iranian nation, and that's critical for a country that has been a nation state for 2,500 years, made up of various ethnicities, various religions, various cultural backgrounds. So that territorial integrity is key. The second is the separation of religion and government, a secular Iran. The third is to ensure that equality, individual rights, human rights and fundamental freedoms, and the rule of law is abided by. And the most important is free and fair elections for the people to choose the form of government they want. So he's not a candidate to become king or president. He wants to play a transitional role, a pivotal role that can move Iran towards that election. And I think that is a noble cause. And I hope he has the opportunity to be able to do that with the people inside Iran. But we have a ways to go to be able to get there at this stage.
Thank you. You spoke you spoke about the distinctions between what we would call the regular army and the IRGC. What's the likelihood that in the course of getting from here to there, there could be civil war with the two sides at war with each other? At what point does the regular army step in and provide some muscle behind efforts to get rid of the regime and bring about freedom and democracy, as we keep saying?
And that's a very, very important question, Frank. And I think that's where communication becomes critical. I'm very disappointed that for 40 days, we have not been able to come up with ways to communicate with the Iranian people. And I'm telling myself, if we haven't been able to communicate with the Iranian people, are the right people communicating with the military and with those forces who want to defect or not? So just being very objective, as I told you, emotionally, we were so happy, my wife and I, the night that the American serviceman was rescued. I mean, it was a brilliant military operation. On the one hand, I see that. On the other hand, I see that this barbaric regime has been able to take the Strait of Hormuz hostage as a choke point, and there hasn't been that same genius planning that was required to make sure the Strait of Hormuz is not closed. And I'm not trying to do a Monday morning quarterbacking. I'm just saying I'm surprised. The same way I'm surprised that for 40 days we haven't been able to communicate with the Iranian people and inform them about what needs to happen, including with the military and others. So if I was advising the US government right now, I would say the first thing you need to do is to make sure you open up the communication channels with the Iranian people. So we can tell the military how they can come and join the people at what appropriate time and what needs to happen. If the cost of this war is roughly $1.5 billion a day, it's pocket change for the United States to start getting this military to convert and side with the people at the appropriate time. And I hope some of that work is going. The problem when I said for 47 years, Republicans and Democrats failed, they did not invest in a proper opposition that could support the Iranian people's homegrown movement. And Frank, there's a big difference. All this talk you hear about regime change and we failed at regime change, there's a big difference about supporting regime change versus imposing regime change. The Iranian people want to get rid of this regime. What else do they need to do? For 30 years, they've been coming in the streets. They've been slaughtered by this regime. They've said death to the dictator. They want this regime gone. Their slogan has been, you're telling us the enemy is America. That's not true. The enemy is you, right here inside. So they know how the regime is working. The problem is there hasn't been, and you and I and my father talked about this 25 years ago at lunch. US policy for 40 somewhat years has been a failed policy to support the homegrown freedom movement, and we should have never gotten to where we are today. We always talked about, in order to prevent two bad alternatives, a nuclear Iran and the military option, the best alternative was investing in the homegrown freedom movement, supporting the opposition, so we would not be where we are today.
That that was exactly your dad's message 20, 25 years ago, whenever it was. When he told me it would take very little. I guess I was asking him what kind of support could the United States give to help foment this change, and he said it would take very little. He said for under $1 billion. That was his price at that time, 20 years ago. It's a little more now. For under $1 billion, if the CIA were to provide communications gear, funds to permit the safe passage of families outside of Iran, so that the instigators of change would feel more comfortable and secure, knowing their families were in places of safety. The Iranian people could take it from there. That was his comment 20 odd years ago, whenever it was. And here it is now, this much later, and we're saying the same thing. We have, as you say, failed to help make that happen, and now we pay the piper. It's really sad. Rob, I see we're getting close to the hour that's been provided for this session, and can't thank you enough on behalf of all the many participants that have signed in to hear you. My expression is you're the real deal, and have been so closely connected and so deeply involved in this narrative for so many years. To have you come in and speak to us is a pleasure, and I should say a privilege. We thank you very, very much for doing this.
I thank you too, Frank, for your friendship, and for the sake of humanity, I hope the United States, Israel, and the people of Iran prevail in the coming months. I really do. And I thank ADL and AJC, Alex and Joel. Thank you very much for setting this up. And I hope we can celebrate a win in the coming months.
We will look forward
Very
to
good.
checking back in with you when that happens, and maybe before then. But God willing, it'll come to a close and a positive resolution soon. Whether you are here because of your connection to ADL or AJC or Rob or Frank, thank you for joining us. Alex, as always, thank you for your partnership. We look forward to continuing to work together as key organizational pieces of the Jewish landscape, both here in North Texas and throughout the country and around the world. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.